An element of the perversion of desire in modern life is the way that the value of things is actually determined by their capacity to provoke scandal, to provoke a kind of sense of being met with an obstacle. One of the strangest but most widespread phenomena, particularly on the internet, although not confined to the internet, is what we call hate following and related things like hate reading and hate watching and so on. So the question is, why do we often addictively expose ourselves to people, accounts, etc., that we find incredibly irritating, unpleasant, unlikable, despicable, etc.? This is, a behavior that is, I think, recognizable to most of us. Most of us have probably participated in it to some extent, but it's not necessarily something we have ready-made explanations for, except for a kind of perversity, right? So one concept that comes out of René Girard that might be useful for making sense of this phenomenon is the notion of scandal or skandalon. So skandalon is the term that appears extensively in it's the Greek term that appears extensively in the Christian Bible, the New Testament. And basically it refers literally to a stumbling block. In other words, some, stone that you trip over or stumble over in the street. And it's also related to, etymologically, to the word for people who limp. And so it has to do with, a very precise physical process, which is, this process of tripping over or stumbling over. But, Girard argues that the way this term is used in the New Testament is not simply just a description of that kind of a situation of stumbling over something, but it has to do with a kind of compulsive or addictive relationship to this situation, right? So a scandal is not just something that you stumble over, it's something that you compulsively or addictively or irresistibly stumble over, that you are drawn to, but then also repelled from. And so this, Girard argues, is essentially the sense of the term that comes up over and over again in sayings of Jesus and elsewhere. So the way we tend to think about scandal in the modern world is, it tends to be some kind of spectacular event, often involving famous people that produces shock, outrage, and often repudiation, right? And so a scandal is usually when somebody, you think of like a sex scandal, somebody is having an affair with somebody else. And this produces, on one hand, a kind of, shock or repudiation, but it also has this underside of a kind of lurid, prurient interest, right? So it has this dual quality, right, of being both drawn to and repelled by the scandal. The term, as Girard explores it in the New Testament writings, is similar to this, although not necessarily precisely the same. And the real question is, what kind of person, and here I think that this phenomenon of hate following is perhaps the most useful illustration, is the kind that becomes a scandal to you. In other words, what kind of person is both, are you both irresistibly drawn to but also repelled by, right? And do you find yourself, in a sense, tripping over, right, or stumbling over? I think all of us who, use this often unhealthy medium of the internet are probably embroiled in certain dynamics like this ourselves, right? And probably, depending on how big of a profile you are, you may have found other people who are like this to you, right? Who follow you but obsessively reply in hostile and unpleasant ways to you, right? For example, the internet is a hyper-mimetic space, right? Where we, essentially find our orientation by looking to others, seeing what they're doing, seeing what they're talking about, seeing what they're pursuing, valuing, seeing as important, and then we, orient ourselves mimetically, imitatively in relation to them, right? and the tools of the internet facilitate this kind of activity. So it makes sense, according to Girard's account, that Skandalon or scandal would be a major kind of feature of this landscape, this hypermimetic landscape, because he argues that, it's essentially the term by which the biblical texts engage with the mimetic phenomena. The explanation for this is simply that if our desires and when our desires are determined by others, then we do not have a straight path to the things that we want. Instead, our path passes through the others who we imitate and model ourselves on, right? And often what we want on the internet is simply attention, right? And that's sort of the thing that we are being conditioned by these platforms to seek out and being conditioned to value, right? And so essentially often the people we hate follow are people who possess a certain amount of attention, right? Have gained this object, right? This good that we are kind of induced to pursue in this context, and who we to some extent resent because of their having achieved that, right? And so, in our engagement with them, we often ourselves attempting to get some sort of attention, right? But, we're always passing through the others who are our sort of rivals for that commodity that we're seeking. And so in this way, they become our Skandalon, our stumbling block, right? In other words, our pursuit of, whatever minor fame or recognition we seek out in this context always, is rooted through these others who we see as our sort of rivals for this. So this is, perhaps not comprehensive, but I think it does explain how some of these relationships work and the ways that certain people become scandals to other people in this online context. And so I think the basic idea that the Skandalon is, always going to be present in any kind of relationship of desire, right, is a crucial point here, right? Or any kind of relationship of desire that is mediated through others, because at least to some extent, we are going to see these others who model our desire as our rivals for the same object. But Girard also argues that there's a particularly perverse development that occurs, and it becomes especially pervasive in the modern world. And this is what he calls in his first book, obstacle addiction. And obstacle addiction simply takes the form of, instead of just learning to value or seek out certain objects or certain certain desired things based on observing others, because that often generates this effect of scandal, right? We come to associate desirability with this effect, right, of scandal. And so through a perverse kind of acceleration, Girard argues that in many cases modern people who are often bewildered by the range of choices that they might pursue of different paths and objects that they might pursue, right, and who are constantly looking for some sense of direction, will determine the value of things simply based on the fact that they produce this sense of that we encounter others who possess them, and our encounter with these others has this negative quality, right? And so because it has this negative quality of producing this sense of blockage, right, that actually increases and enhances the value of the object that we're seeking out. And so Girard argues that an element of the perversion of desire in modern life is the way that the value of things is actually determined by their capacity to provoke scandal, to provoke a kind of sense of being met with an obstacle. It basically is a kind of proxy that, in the absence of any kind of more universal or transcendent way of defining what would be good or desirable or valuable, the capacity to produce scandal or obstacle stands in for that and heightens our sense of what is valuable and important. And again, this is the phenomenon that he refers to as obstacle addiction. And he observes it particularly in the works of writers like Dostoevsky and Proust, who are particularly astute at exploring the perversions of modern life and modern psychology, where these characters are kind of intensely driven by their fascination with other people or things that they on some level hate, despise, find repulsive, and yet they're irresistibly drawn to them because they're the only things capable of producing this kind of effect of scandal. And so, I recommend reading Girard's account of how this psychology works, which he calls the underground psychology, also in his first book, Deceit, Desire, and the Novel. But I think these phenomena have been, if anything, intensified by the hypermimetic environment of the internet.
Hey, what's up? If you enjoyed this video, take a second to subscribe to this YouTube channel. We publish videos like this several times a week. And also, if you're interested in studying the work of René Girard on your own, we made an awesome, totally free 18-page study guide that you can download at GirardCourse.com. It's expertly curated. It's in a logical sequence that's going to help you master his entire body of work at your own pace. You can go ahead and get that at GirardCourse.com. All right, that's all I got for you. Over and out.